Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah,
100%. I think what you're starting to get on too is, a large part of like what we talked about when we were kind of walking everybody through like some of our like pre-production approaches. A big focal point of that is the idea that at that stage, playing it instead of just like overly communicating or talking about it is really important. And I think, that's not to say that in this phase, trying and experimenting with different things isn't also important, but depending on your setup, or if you're, going in with a limited timeline to complete something in the studio with a producer, or, hiring out a studio, right? If you're in one of those scenarios outside the like unlimited time scope of a home studio setup, you're going to want to maybe like have to put a little bit of extra trust in someone that maybe knows that room, knows that gear there, or sees the same thing. So maybe you're locking up on some of these things, and maybe you might realize that you fall short in one of those languages, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But it's about finding and dialing in what similar language you both speak, and short of the tropey "when words fail, music speaks" line that we're dancing dangerously close to right now. I think there's really some truth to that, in that when you circle back and get down on that, it's a way that you will save time, because if Tom has an idea and knows, and we're locking up on, he totally seems to get what I've kind of said about it, but I don't really know how to do that technically or whatever, then maybe instead of being like, well, I don't want to do it that way, that seems weird or whatever, it's just like sometimes there's an extension of trust where if you're unsure, like it's okay to try that stuff if it is you extending, the time and belief to somebody who otherwise on all fronts, you can really trust from a collaborative standpoint. So I think that's getting on that same page at this phase is really good, because you don't always have an unlimited scope of time, money, and energy and effort. And you also don't want to try things 1,000 times and then be like, well, now I don't even like the part because I've been trying it so many times, right? That's also a big part of getting set up ahead of time, like you mentioned.
So I mean, like the next almost like choice of our sounds and our signal chain is, what instrument are we using? And I honestly feel like that really is dictated on the style of music. There's you're not going to go into a I mean, you can, but it won't end well. You're not going to go into a classical recording session with a PV 5150 and say, cool, I'm here to make a violin part. Like, you can. Maybe
you're Sean Mackin from Yellow Card, and maybe that's something you want to do, and he could probably pull it off. But if the style is supposed to be pure Western classical violin, right.
It's not going to fly. So, as far as like the style of music, that's going to dictate what kind of amps, what kind of in this case, I'm just going to run with the guitars. What kind of guitars? What kind of pedals? What if we go back to like the referential type stuff? What has been done before? Is that what we're kind of going for? Do we have access to that gear?
Yeah, right. And that goes back to having those conversations ahead of time to know, be like, hey, have you listened to our previous records? Like, this is what the gear we have. Or maybe you'd be like, well, that's cool. This band's coming in. Like, I dig it. I get the records. And then they come in and they're just like, yeah, no, we borrowed all that gear. We don't, my amp is this like Marshall MG FX head. And then you're like, okay, right. That's definitely not what's on that record. Well, we have to pivot, right? And we got to figure out a way to do it, either DI and reamp later, whatever it is, to get it done. But yes, it's like those stylistic references help understand what's the quickest path to achieving what the band is looking for or what you as an artist are looking for. And the more you do it, the more you go through, the more you understand those references, and the more you can call out, hey, that's definitely like a hyper scoop sounding like crate amp. You know what I mean? Like probably mic'd like this or like this, but for that style. Or if you want to play more towards this style, that's probably like a really dimed AC30, like pushed to its limits, whatever it might be. And then the guitar, and even down to looking at the vocal as an instrument, obviously, what kind of vocal are you in, like the punk hardcore realm, where your best bet is to get the singer that's used to like being able to fucking bounce around on stage. We talked a lot about this, right?
He was cupping the mic, by the way.
If that was not directly apparent. Sorry, it's not a 58, so I don't have the same grill cover. But do you want that out of it? Do you want to emulate some of those things that the band is doing live? And what are the strengths of the material? We also talked a lot about this and how the way something is performed live. Sometimes that's your job, is to figure out how to like capture that energy and what kind of setup will do that. And it does start with the gear, but then it also starts with the intent of what kind of mic you put up and how you choose to capture each stage of that to get the best result, right? So we talked about sometimes in terms of an instrument choice, it's not just which one's first, it's maybe all of them together is going to make something happen, and you should know, or try to know, if you've been working with the band or speaking with the band, be like, hey, this feels like a style of music and a group of people that is like been playing together forever. There's probably some chemistry there. Maybe that's an intangible that I want to make sure I can somehow capture, or instead of trying, make sure there's a sight line, because this band has never been in a scenario where they can't see, the guitar and bass player are always looking at each other, right? And maybe they don't need to, but then all of a sudden you put them in a scenario they've never been in before like that, and they freak out and lose all sense of vibe and forget every single note, you know what I mean? Like key, whatever. So it's like having that comfortable, but also informing like what about the style of music is the most important to grasp and latch onto, and make sure you can solidify into the tracks is really a lot of that. And it starts with the gear, but it also is then the approach, which is why this phase of things is kind of dictates everything else that comes behind it sonically.
And I like we briefly talked about during like the pre-production series of like of the DI'd metal guitar.
Such a great sound.
Yes.
Detuned, drop egg, floppy strings. Adam can relate.
No setup.
But like
Zero setup.
If
bowed neck.
Yeah. Intonation off like multiple steps.
Ninth fret, fretting out.
But that I mean, that's like one of the most quintessential ideas of like the gear playing a hypercritical role in just getting the right take. If you don't have the right distortion and it's not feeling appropriate, that's gonna like really mess up the sound of the record.
And you're gonna respond as a player to how that is, to what you're creating in real time. Which is why I have been so excited to dive into this with you guys, because I know we, in many ways, all three of us are huge proponents of committing as early as you can in the process. And this is such a, now of course you can leave yourself trapdoors and outs, right? You can DI, you can reamp, maybe sometimes depending on the style, you can reprogram, you can switch out sounds if you're doing MIDI, but like there are certain aspects that will define the way the end product feels and the way the artist feels about it that really benefit from being captured up front and committed to. And that's, I think, what you're starting to get on. So I clearly I'm all ears on it.
Because I'm sure, like, as engineers and producers, like you guys probably feel this way, but like the closer that you can get the instrument to sound like what you want it to sound like on the record, be it a guitar, be it the vocal, like as much of the vibe as you can capture in like an actual physical space as possible, like that's probably going to lead to the best result at the end of the day when it comes time to actually tracking the record. Now, I think there's obviously merit to doing a lot of things in the box and doing things in post. You have control over it later, especially if you're like not too sure about what it is that you're trying to do. But like Casey said, you can have backups and DIs and dry signals and all this kind of stuff so that you can work with something in post if you really have to. But I know both of you are very talented engineers and producers in your own right. But every time that we've worked together, it's like, no, let's get it right before it even hits a microphone, because if we can get it right in a physical space, all we have to do at that point is press record, and we've done it. Yeah. We've gotten the sound, like, especially, and that's not always an option. Like when we're up at the barbershop recording piano and we have all their crazy outboard gear and their piano and all of their crazy microphones. And again, quick shout out to the barbershop studios.
Hey.
Like it's obviously a lot easier to get a perfect pop piano sound out of that room with that space and that gear. But then when I'm here and I'm working on demos or I'm working on a record for somebody, like we don't have an acoustic piano here. Like I'm going to just pull up the best like soft synth that I can to make that happen. But I'm going to try to pick something that as a player, when I'm recording, it feels right, so that I get the emotional quality out of it. Like even if I'm just like, I just need a piano quickly, I'll probably still take the time to like go through my soft synths and pick a piano that emotionally is going to have the same quality that I'm going to want for the final product. Even if I do end up changing it later, like I want to make sure that performance is spot on, because as Casey said, like that's going to change how I'm going to play as an artist. It's going to affect how like emotionally that's going to translate on record. So your instrument choice could be everything. It could be everything from like, not only how the part feels, but like how you play it as well. Like maybe you're on a guitar that's got like a funky, G string or something like that, and you switch strings, and in doing so, you put it on like a lower string at a higher fret, and all of a sudden that's like a different timbral quality. And as Tom has mentioned in earlier episodes, like timbre is everything on records these days, because everybody wants to hear something new and fresh. And so like picking your instrument choice out the gate is so critical before you even think about capturing it, because that emotional quality really comes between the connection between the instrumentalist and the instrument itself.
Right. Well, I think, and also like speaking specifically to what you're talking about in terms of tracking keys and then, tracking and trying to find the right MIDI sound or patch that sounds realistic to you. I mean, even something as simple as if you're a keyboard player or a piano player, get a MIDI controller with weighted keys, right? Because
if you need something with weighted keys,
right?
Yeah,
like that is maybe the difference in terms of like you're going to like play something with finesse, like much differently if it feels like it's on a super just like cheap plastic, like just a Kai like backpack controller versus something that feels like a piano, and then you're hearing a real grand piano sound and you're feeling the way the velocity responds differently to it. You're going to ultimately, what you track and put down in MIDI is going to be so much closer to the way you would be reacting to a piano and the way it sounds in a space. And the same thing goes for guitar or even a vocalist in the way they hear themselves, right?
And that's why I've particularly been so fond of my Korg SV1, and especially, I've had the pleasure of accumulating a nice synth collection over the last year that I'm very proud of. I've found that, between the SV1, the Prophet, and now this, the Behringer Poly D, like I didn't realize how much keyboard responsiveness would affect the way that I played that keyboard. And, even coming down to like the things of like the aftertouch that's on the Prophet. I mean, like that has like given me a new palette as an artist to work with. Where even though I could be doing that on a soft synth, because we have the wonderful Arturia V collection, which we just got.
Which is super powerful.
It's so sick. Highly recommend. like, you know, I have the option to kind of go between the soft synth and the real synth, and I'll do different ones for different reasons depending on the type of response that I need out of it as an instrumentalist.
Right.
So,
Hey, Adam, do you remember there's the Steinway Model M at Philly Sound Studios?
I don't remember playing. I probably did play.
yeah,
it, but, I don't remember it as